Friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Cigar Social Podcast. My name is Matt. As always, thank you for joining. This is episode 21. Our guest today doesn't need any fancy introduction at all. Let's get right to it, folks. I'm very excited to announce and introduce the president and CEO of Tatuaje Cigars, the one and only Pete Johnson. Thanks for spending time today, Pete.
What's happening, man? Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No, thank you. Before we dive into Pete's experiences of Tatuaje, some of the other projects, let's talk about what we're smoking and what we're drinking right now. Pete, what are you smoking over there?
I'm actually smoking, hopefully the same thing you are. I'm smoking the Cabaiguan Britanica Extra that was made in Nicaragua using a Connecticut Ecuador wrapper with Nicaraguan binders and fillers. Very happy about this cigar. It's got to be one of my favorite morning cigars, but I'll tell you, here it is in the evening, and I'm enjoying it just as much. So,
5 3/8 by 48. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that the size that became very popular with the Bella Encre Reserve?
You're dead on. Yeah, you're dead on. It's 5 3/8 by 48. It's the same size as the Blanc and the Blanc Reserva. It's in Cuba. The molds actually come from Cuba. In Cuba, the molds are actually called Britannica Extra, and that's why I just decided to call it the same size as the mold.
Okay. This is a medium to full-bodied cigar, right? And it's also, if I correct me if I'm wrong,
it's more medium.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more medium. This cigar, it just has a really big amount of flavor on it. It's not, you don't, like, when you start getting strength levels that are high, but you have a balance to it, you start getting maybe a little upset in the stomach.
Yeah.
In regards to this cigar actually really is full body, full flavor, but medium strength. It's not over the top, so you won't get a little woozy from it. It will just give you a nice enjoyment, enjoying quality, and you won't feel like you need to eat some food after it either.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it's named after the Cuban city that is home to some of the world's most talented cigar makers.
Yeah, Cabaiguan Cuba. It's funny. The only reason why I use the name is because I read an article many years ago in Cigar Aficionado, and there was a very famous tobacco man that they were interviewing, and he talked about people he met in Cuba and the cities that he found had the most talented tobacco people. A lot of times were outside of Havana, especially the tobacco people. Havana is known because of its, history, and of course because it's kind of got a star power to it. But there's a lot of talent in the center of the island, and somewhere off in the distance, it's 6 hours outside of Havana. And Cabaiguan is at one of those places. Same thing with Remedios. If you think about the Garcia family, they're from Las Villas or Villa Clara region, and that whole region right there is very knowledgeable when it comes to tobacco.
Wow. This cigar came in 1,000 boxes, released worldwide, so these are pretty limited.
Yeah, it actually ended up being a little short because we originally did 500 with the backup of 500 coming in, but there was a little bit of miscommunication with the factory, and they technically never made the second 500. So the second 500 started rolling in slowly over the last few months, and we just got a small inventory in, I think, just last week. So we're flush on them again. But to be honest, I love this cigar so much, and we're actually trimming our portfolio down by a considerable amount this year. What we think is considerable, because we never want to get rid of anything. I think I'll probably add this size into the Cabaiguan line, but I have to wait a little bit because I'm using those particular molds to make a special production cigar this year, and I want to make sure that I don't intrude on that.
Oh, okay. Off the jump, this is outstanding. So, if I missed anything, I feel like we covered this. What are you drinking anything over there? And uh, where is over there?
Yeah, I'm in Miami. Um, this is like my courtyard patio, and it's it's been cold, but all of a sudden, and I'm wearing a sweat jacket, but all of a sudden it got really steamy and hot and sticky tonight. But I'm gonna go with it and stick with wearing the sweat jacket. Um, but I'm drinking. I don't know if you ever heard of a brand called Rare Character. Rare Character is a whiskey company that started buying barrels several years ago from different distilleries, and what they do is eventually go directly to groups or companies and offer them barrels
Oh,
at
okay.
a little bit of a markup, obviously. And what they actually do is I mean, this is the worst possible way to describe what they do, but what they do essentially is they come to a guy like me and they say, "Here's a bunch of barrel samples that we can get you, that we have access to. A lot of these barrels we have on hand already. We'll do everything from start to finish. If you like a particular barrel, we'll slap your label on it. We'll actually send it off to a retailer or a reseller so they can actually sell it for you. And it actually makes our lives, especially for we do the Saints and Sinners Club. It's really easy for us to like do almost like a one-stop shopping, and that way the money's collected by a company that is like legitimately set up to sell whiskey online. And
Hmm.
it's a really good company, and the guy who owns it has been collecting and buying barrels for years. And I'll tell you, the juice is good, like super good. He gets them from a lot of different distilleries. Um, you could name one. He probably has barrels from every one of them.
That's awesome.
But cool
Reminds
company,
me of
cool concept.
Yeah, it reminds me of
What's that?
what like an MGP does, where they'll distill, they'll barrel it up, and then you can get it. You can buy if you're a startup company or you just want to buy the barrel. You can go there and they'll just sell you whatever they have access to or what they've made.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that we could go and do that, but the difference with Rare Character is that they literally do everything for you. And actually, I think one of their whiskeys somewhere got like whiskey of the year on some whiskey review place. Really good stuff. The guy has a great palate and a great nose, and um, I actually have 7 or 8 different sample bottles here at the house testing. But this is actually a barrel that was done by my buddy Life of Lux on Instagram. Uh, Joel Wilbur is his name. If you want to follow someone who really collects whiskey and cigars and wine, Life of Lux at Life of Lux on Instagram.
Okay, all right. I did a dram of the Coppercraft Straight Bourbon, and it's a whiskey from Michigan, and I just had that kind of to sip. Usually, I do a lot of whiskey. Sometimes I'm too drunk to walk out of the shed, but right now I'm also doing something a little different tonight, and that is that I had asked my friends at the Chi-Town crew on Dojo about this cigar, and they all agreed that coffee is like you mentioned, perfect morning cigar, but a pairing with coffee would be a good go-to. So I'm also doing that. I did a French press. It's a little off camera, but I did a French press of local coffee right before the show, drinking it black, just like it's intended. And
Nice.
it
I
is.
like that, by the way. As it's intended. Thank you.
It is a great pair. I'm going to probably find myself drinking more coffee tonight with this than the whiskey. Um, just a great pair. We have
Yeah,
a few.
I'll be honest. You got me craving coffee now.
This is the dark roast by two brothers here in the
Oh
Chicagoland
yeah.
area.
Okay.
Yeah, this
Good
is their
company.
flagship. Yeah, they have a brewery too, the Roundhouse in Aurora, and then they also have their coffee beanery or whatever they call it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
What do
you
you
can
call
find
it?
it.
I like the name Beanery. It makes sense.
I think it makes sense to me. It's yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah.
it completely makes sense to me too.
So we have a lot of diehard fans of Tatuaje on the dojo and in the crew, and it seems like you have almost established like this culture that surrounds great cigars, and people are just drawn to it, almost like a cult following, if you would. I've
Oh
noticed.
man, I really hate the word cult.
Not a cult
Definitely not what
following.
I'm going for. Not what I'm going for. Yeah, I mean there are people out there that have cult followings, but I don't know. Most of the guys that are part of our club really have just become friends of the company and friends of the family, and I've been on trips to Nicaragua with these guys, so I don't know. I just feel like a cult is someone that wants you to stay in, and
Drink the Kool
we're
Aid.
the type of group that wants you to experience everything and try everything. If you come back to us, it's the bonus. But yeah, the cult the cult kind of locks you up and tells you can't go anywhere,
Gotta wear matching shoes. Um,
and will tell you that every other product sucks.
it's true. Starting from your days playing gigs up and down the Sunset Strip, how did you get into cigars, and what inspired you
Yeah.
to get into the cigar industry?
Well, okay. So back in the early '90s, I started smoking cigars while I was on stage. There was one day that I saw like a TV clip of like some, I don't know what it was. It was like a celebrity party on like one of these news TV shows, like Entertainment Tonight or something like that, Mary Hart or whatever, whoever it was back then. And they were they were at a charity function, and all these guys were in tuxedos smoking cigars. I go, well, that looks kind of fun. I don't know about wearing a tuxedo, but I like the fact that people are enjoying themselves. And I was never a cigarette smoker. I tried a cigarette when I was younger, didn't like it. Um, and I really didn't have many vices. I was in love with certain things, but music was my focus. And then I found cigars. And honestly, cigars are actually what led me to wine, because the cigar store I worked at, that I eventually got a job at, was next to a French restaurant. So I would go next door to have lunch, and they would teach me about French wine. So that's really what got me into the wine part. But when I was when I was playing music on the Sunset Strip, I got a cheap cigar, liked it, decided I want to go a little bit heavier or more expensive. Bought more of a premium cigar back then, which was $2.50, which was a big deal back then. And I was like, I'm gonna start smoking, and then I decided to start smoking when I was playing. Not an easy thing to do, by the way,
No, I
um,
bet.
especially trying to keep it in your mouth while you're playing guitar or bass guitar. So I kind of got into it, went down the rabbit hole, found what I didn't like and what I did like, and started collecting a little bit. And eventually, um, the store that I frequented actually asked me to work for them, and that was the place next to the French restaurant.
Is that where you were mixing pipe tobacco by hand?
Yeah, so my job when they hired me, because they had, it was right in the beginning of the boom, and business was kind of cranking for stores.
Yeah.
They had a big issue with, customers, pipe tobacco customers that were coming in saying, "Hey, give me a bag of 1Q, or give me a bag of, Ancient Mariner." They had a lot of crazy names too. 1Q happened to be a factory blend, which you could buy, and we used that as a base for a lot of different aromatic blends. But that's a different story altogether. But every time people would come in, they're like, "Yeah, give me a bag of Ancient Mariner," and next thing you know, like they're running out, and they still got to run the register and work the humidor, but there was no one to make the pipe tobacco. So they're like, "Okay, time to get dirty." And they would literally say, "Okay," there was no such thing as gloves. Like you go to any store now and you get rubber gloves, right?
Yeah.
But back then, the only place you saw rubber gloves was in a doctor's office. So Yeah, my hands would get really dirty. And the cool thing was I was kind of used to it because I grew up running printing presses. Like when I was younger, I ran printing presses, so I worked multiple years printing things and using blanket wash and getting ink all over my hands
Yep.
and destroying my fingers, coated with this junk every day. And then eventually they're like, mix the pipe tobacco. I was like, okay. Took me like 20 minutes to get all that pipe tobacco out from under my fingernails and the color out of my skin, but I enjoyed it because I was following recipes. But then we started doing our own recipes. Like, hey, let's try something different. Like, let's try to copy another blend that's already out there, or let's try to do our own version of that blend. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, dirty work. And eventually, though, I think it was fairly quick. I continued mixing pipe tobacco, but it was about 6 months into working at that store. I'm fairly good with numbers, like quickly remembering numbers. And the owner was like, "How much is that Henry Clay?" And I'm like, $1.50. How much is that punch? And I'm like, $1. Like back then, everything was like 95 cents, $1.15, $1.20. When you were talking expensive, you were going towards Avos and Ashtons and PGs and stuff like that. But for like the everyday guy, he was coming in buying like between $1.50 and $3.50 per cigar, and it was just easy to remember. So the humidor started small, eventually became like a humidor full of, I don't know, 300 facings or something like that, maybe more. And I knew every price.
Wow.
Like I can tell you today that the price of a Henry Clay Brava back then was $1.15 in that store. I can tell you at one point in time, uh, Punch Rothschilds and Hoyle Rothschilds were $1.50. The problem was within 6 months of me working there, the boom started really to hit, and then every cigar company started raising their prices. And when I tell you raising their prices, it was every 6 months, not once a year, once every few years. Every 6 months, there was a 5 to 10% increase. So by the time I finished,
Wow.
working at that store and moving on to the next store, Henry Clay's were close to like four something. It got up, like shit got really, really crazy. Um, and then that's where the end of the boom happened, where people got greedy. People started using bad tobacco because they couldn't get enough tobacco.
Yep.
People started making cigars with banana leaves, and new cigar smokers were all excited to get into this culture, and they'd walk into a store and buy a cigar that tasted like shit. But I can tell you, the good companies survived, and the bad companies that made shitty product, they're obviously not here anymore. So, yeah, that was a long way to get to your answer, but I can't remember what the question is now. So,
No,
yeah,
actually,
that's where I started blending
I,
pipe tobacco.
I wanted to follow up on your experiences, and so thank you. But one experience that kind of blew my mind when I found out was, can you talk about how you ended up working on tour with the Jonas Brothers?
Sorry, I just knocked the mic. Hopefully, it didn't make too much of a sound. Um, yeah, so in 20, 2009, I started working with this guy named Sean Johnson, no relation. He was introduced to me by my accountant because my accountant was the accountant to a lot of musicians. Like my accountant, still to this day, like he's a good friend, and I've known him. We used to play poker together. Was like in the Bon Jovi "Wanted Dead or Alive" video. Like he's been around. Like he's one of those guys that he was House of Pains, um, not attorney, but accountant. A bunch of different groups. And Casper happened to work as a road manager for one of his clients. And Bruce is his name. He called me. He says, "Hey, you know, our friend Casper is a cigar smoker, and he's got tattoos, and he's actually getting tattooed right next door to your office. He wants to come see you. And I was like, yeah, okay. So we met, and Casper had been on tour with kind of a little bit of everybody. He did, the Warp tours and all those things back in the day. And he was also an assistant tour manager on the Jonas Brothers tours early on when Jonas blew up the first time, right? So fast forward, we're already working together. 2012 comes. I decide to start Atelier with my brother Casey, my buddy Dan Welsh, who is the face of Surrogates and the brand owner of Surrogates, and of course Casper, Sean Johnson. And Sean gets a call, and it's one of the guys from the Jonas Brothers. It says, "Hey, we're going back on tour in South America, and we want you to come with us to help us out." And he's like, "Nah, I'm in the cigar business now. I'm really happy, and I'm just, I'd rather not." And I kind of tapped him on the shoulder. I said, "Wait, hold on for a second. See if they'll take two of us, but they don't have to pay us. I just want to travel. They don't have to pay us. I'll take care of everything." And so Casper pitched it to him, and they bit. They're like, "Sure." So I went on tour for my 10-year anniversary in 2013. That's when it happened. As kind of like a vacation, but I ended up being a roadie. They don't like to call them roadies anymore. They're techs,
Gear techs, yes.
I became like a gear tech, but I didn't know what I was doing. Literally, just tell me, "Hey, go move this over there," and I was gonna go for it, right? "Hey, can you go get us a bottle of whiskey at that store in the middle of Monterrey, Mexico, where, they didn't tell me that that's where people get killed, but I went out and got a bottle of whiskey for something. So I ended up carrying their luggage. I didn't care, and even the kids who knew that I was in the cigar business, and by that time the company's 10 years old. They know about my brand because they're all cigar smokers.
Okay.
They started asking, "Why is he here? Why is he here?" I go, "I'm on vacation. If you need me to carry your luggage, I'll carry your luggage." So that's what I did. And I had a blast. And it was one of those once in a lifetime experiences. And even to the last day, the security people were like, "So what's your position with the band?" I go, "No, I'm on vacation." They're like, "You were serious about that?" I go, "Yeah. That's why I'm here on vacation." But I became very good friends with a few people on the crew, and still one of my favorite times in my life, because it just was fun, and it was just an experience. I love the journey, and I love living different experiences. So if someone said, "Hey, you got an opportunity to go to the Far East to climb a mountain," I'd probably do it. Scared shitless, but I'd probably do it. Sometimes I don't like to do the planning, but if someone says, "Hey, don't worry, the planning's already done, you're going to come with us," I'll be like, "Okay, let me ask my wife." That's where it's led to now, though. Let me ask my wife first.
In 2003, you were introduced to Jose Don Pepin Garcia. At that time, you described an idea of a cigar that you liked, and you asked him to make that cigar. And from what I understand, on his first attempt, it wasn't really what you were looking for, but on his second attempt, at that point, you knew that was the guy who was going to make your cigars. Can you describe how that developed?
It wasn't so much the first attempt. The first attempt was actually through the mail. They sent me a sample that they made for me, and I didn't like it. And my friend Ben Gehrman, who was a sales rep for Villazon Cigars, which was the owners of Punch and Hoyo at one time, he said, "Don't worry, we're going to come and meet with you and make you cigars in front of you, so we can sit down and come up with a blend for you."
That was Don Pepin?
Ben Gehrman. He was a sales... Yeah.
Okay.
No, this was Ben Gehrman. He was a sales rep for Villazon, but he had called me about this guy named Pepin, but he called him like Don Pepe, or he called him Pepe. He didn't call him Don. He just said his name's Pepin or Pepe, or I can't even remember what he said, but it was. So I met Pepin. They came to the Grand Havana room by that time, and that's where I was working. And I met him. I set up a table for him to roll on, and he rolled me a couple sticks that I didn't like. Ultimately, we had a brief conversation about his history, where he came from, and I grabbed a couple old Cuban cigars that I knew were smoking really good, and I went back to him. I gave him one. I smoked one, and he, through translation, he says, "You want this?" I go, "Yeah, I want that." And the next cigar he rolled was that. Like, he literally knew that blend so well from being in Cuba, because he left Cuba in 2001, but didn't make it to the States until 2002. So he knew the blend, and with Nicaraguan tobaccos, with different tobaccos, but similar seed varietals, obviously. Actually, they're all Cuban seed varietals. He was able to make me a cigar that was truly like just something different, something that I had been looking for in the domestic market for years. And I went home that night. I was like, I'm going to make my brand with this guy, after trying to do it in the mid 90s, not understanding what the concept was of, like, really how much work it would take. When I met him and he was able to listen to my ideas and put something together specifically for me, then I was like, I'm in. I'm fully in. And it's been a great experience because, I mean, shit, I was their first client. Before they made anybody else's cigars, they actually made Tatuaje first. That was the first cigar
Oh,
that they ever produced in their factory. Before they're even their own brand, they had Tatuaje being made. Not
wow.
because I was in the front of the line, it's because that's how it worked out. I was the one that took the chance on this family that no one knew about. And yeah, I was in the right place at the right time, and you know, honestly, the relationship built over the years, and ultimately, I ended up marrying Pepin's daughter, um, just purely by the chance of, um, we just became best friends, and next thing you know, we're just always around each other, and it became just the natural progression of our lives. So it was so I'm truly part of the family, but I would say I didn't make Pepin, but I helped guide him to be who he's supposed to be, which is a Cuban cigar maker.
Yeah.
Even though he makes Nicaraguan cigars, his history for, so many years, he started rolling cigars in Cuba at 11 years old. I think there was a lot of people around him when he first got in the United States trying to change his opinion on how to, like what style of cigar to roll. There were a lot of people like, "Hey, make me an Opus X, make me a Padron." Okay, yeah, those are great cigars, but do you really want to copy George Padron and Carlito Fuente? No, because those guys are who they are because of who they are. You don't you don't come in and say, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make the best knockoff to Opus." No. Like, I've had conversations with people in stores where they're like, "Hey, sell me one of your cigars." And I'm like, "Well, what do you enjoy?" And they're like, "Well, I'm an Opus X smoker." I'm like, "I got nothing for you." I'm not going to sell them a cigar because I know that it's not going to be an Opus X, because that's
Yeah.
not what I tried to make. Um, so it's really important that I think in Pepin's journey, I might have been the guy, not in so many words, but I might have been the guy that said, just be who you are. Don't listen to the noise of, this is what you're supposed to make for the U.S. market. Make what is you. And what is you is where you grew up. So that's what, for me, I was a big Cuban cigar fan, so I fell in love with that whole concept. And I was like, the only thing I wanted to copy was a Cuban cigar. I didn't want to copy anybody else that I knew in this industry. I didn't want to copy Lito Gomez. I didn't want to copy George Padron. I didn't want to copy Carlito. Any of these people. I wanted to knock off the Cubans and do it better than them. Ultimately, you know, side by side, I believe we do, but they're still the naysayers. I think
How long?
I think there's about 80% of domestic cigars that blow away any Cuban cigar anyway. So
How long did it take to go from that first meeting with Pepin to actually getting a product on the shelf?
like 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think that.
The reality is, it's quick. It's quick, but the reality is when you have good, clean tobacco and it's ready to be used, you don't have to wait a long time to have a cigar ready. You can actually put the cigar together. You have to wait about 21 days to wick off excess moisture. And then from there, you can start smoking them. What they do in the box with aging is really where they start changing. But you don't need to let them sit for, X amount of years. The tobacco's ready. You get a sense when you're making a cigar and you pick up a cigar off the bench and it's banging right off the bench and there's all the excess moisture and there's all the muted flavors, but it still pops through everything, then if it sits for a year, it's going to be great. And if it sits for 2, it's going to be even better. It's like, for me, it's like a great bottle of wine. When you open up a brand new vintage of a great Chateau, you're like, okay, this is really good, but I bet you it's going to be amazing in a few years when it kind of all comes together.
Yep.
I always like to say, kind of like chateaus, great chateaus and great wineries, they don't put crap in the bottle. You can't put crap in the cigar and expect it to not be crap later on. You have to start with good juice, It's with anything. I mean, if you put something in your ingredients when you're making a dish, whatever, pasta, and it's something that's like rotten or something that just overpowering to the dish, you're going to end up ruining the dish. But if you put a good balance of, spices and herbs or whatever that you want to put in that dish, you're going to end up with a great result.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of great results, this thing is phenomenal. I'm about halfway, maybe a little past halfway through. Absolutely outstanding. I think the coffee recommendation nails it right on the head.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The whiskey is maybe a little overpowering, but I needed a glass of whiskey today, so.
I mean, who doesn't?
It's Friday, right? It is Friday.
Right. Yeah. So, how do you decide what size to release cigars in? Is it a taste factor or is it a financially based decision?
No, it's just the moment.
Okay.
There's no rhyme or reason. I really like this Britanica size, and I don't do it that often. And we literally have like one mold set that we can use in the factory. So we really have to time based off of the other production of Belancs. We need to make sure that we have enough Belancs in stock before we start rolling something else, because we need to time the mold set, because we can't have 2 pairs rolling them. We have 1 pair. And I don't know. I think last year it was just like, you know what? I think we have enough time to put together the Britanica in the Racine Atelier, the Britanica in the Surrogates Big Ten, and the Britanica in the Cabaiguan, and kind of make those like celebration cigars. Part of the 10-year anniversaries for Atelier were Surrogates and Atelier, and then the Cabaiguan. Really, I just wanted to put it in the lineup because I thought Cabaiguan, is, to me, it's still one of my favorite blends. It doesn't get as much play because of the Connecticut wrapper sometimes, but it's weird. Connecticut wrappers are probably still one of the most smoked wrappers in the industry. But sometimes people forget about, certain brands. When I started, upgrading the bands a little bit and make them a little prettier instead of
Yeah.
very simple, it did catch people's eye.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can't do that as well, right?
No.
I have that nice
Yeah.
blur effect, but it's just really, I don't know. I love the cigar. I love the blend. I think it's really subtle. It's got a sweetness to it. It's not overpowering. It's got big body, big
Yeah.
flavor. Coat your mouth, but it doesn't punch you in the head.
And it's not a cigar that's going to take you an hour and a half. I mean, I feel like before this is over, I'm probably going to light up a Fausto or something different. But
Well,
um,
I'm actually going to go back to back.
you're going to go back to back. Nice.
Yeah, because honestly, I had another cigar sitting here, and as soon as I lit this up, I go, "That's where I want to end the night."
Yep.
Sometimes it's nice for me because since this is more on that medium side, I like to kind of clean my palate with a lighter cigar at the end of the night. Sometimes on the occasion, if I'm with Dan Surrogates, he'll pop out like a 5-pack of Cracker Crumbs, and we're lighting up Cracker Crumbs as the last cigar. And then I wake up the next morning, kind of chewing on my tongue.
A little off topic. So you're a
Yeah.
bassist, and from what I heard, your old band Hung Jury, which I believe had songs called "Dark Country," "Evil Way," and "The Real Thing." Uh, I
You
feel
believe or
no, and I've heard it. And what I with the bands that I grew up with, it reminded me of a cross between like L.A. Guns, Skid Row, and Ugly Kid Joe. What was
Yeah.
your
Well, yeah,
yeah?
I was just going to go there. You were I was beating you to the answer, but so what you heard with those three songs was a progression of the band. On the, I think you probably heard them from a particular EP that was put out a while back,
Yes,
not by us,
screaming in
by
blue.
Screaming in Blue. Yeah, but that's literally from like songs from our beginning all the way to our end.
Okay.
So Dark Country was at the end, and it's kind of more heavier and angrier. Real Thing was early on. Evil Way was kind of in the middle. So we went through in a short 3.5 or 2.5, no, 3.5 years. We went through a lot of progressions. Um, shit, not even that. Let's see, 3 years. Sorry, we went through a lot of changes because we all had heavier influences, but this is the wrong thing you could ever do. When we first started our band, we were trying to go after what was hot at the moment instead of being ourselves.
Yep.
And we were trying to fit into that niche of what was hot, and it worked because we played the Whiskey, we played the Roxy, we played a place called Gazari's, we played the Troubadour. We won a contract with Budweiser, to be sponsored by Budweiser, even though we drank Miller Genuine Draft. we we took the free beer, um, and they paid us, which was awesome. But yeah, we tried to fit into what was in, and it worked. But at the same time, we'd be driving back and forth from practice, listening to things like Pantera and King Diamond and Guar, and just heavier music.
Hmm.
But we had so many different influences within the band that they all kind of stemmed together. Like, I would say out of all of us, maybe one of the guitar players and the singer were more on the lighter side of everything. I was a mixture of everything. I was super into Guns N' Roses, but I was also into Duran Duran because I was a
Yeah.
bass player, and those are two great bass players, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, into Motley Crue, Skid Row, um, Pantera, Metallica, Megadeth, stuff like that. But then, our drummer was like super into King Diamond and Guar and like heavy shit. So
Stuff.
he'd beat and I think Jason, our guitar player, was kind of like a little bit all over the place. he would listen to anything that would put him in a weird mindset to write.
Yeah.
So we gravitated heavier, but one thing that we always kept with us were harmonies. Like we had a lot of melodies, we had a lot of harmonies, and so if we ever mixed into anything, I always like to say we were kind of like a cross between Extreme and Alice in Chains towards the end. Because we had the harmonies of both, but maybe a little bit more rock and roll instead of grunge that Alice in Chains had. We had more of that extreme kind of. Plus, I mean, if you heard our last demo that no one's heard, actually, the music's just all over the place. Just completely all over the place. I thought that was when we were doing our best shit, but we broke up. We broke up. Our singer came to our band meeting. We had a directive from our lawyers and our management. Our lawyers and our management, very good management, very good lawyers, managed and, represented very famous bands. And they said, okay, over the next 6 months, you're not allowed to do this, this, and this. You're only allowed to play at like dive bars where you don't promote and no one knows that you're playing them at. And if we want people to go, we'll invite record industry people to those shows, but do not promote that you're going to play these shows.
Is this the same 6 months that you had to do a name change?
Oh yeah, we did the name change to kind of hide the identity of who we were. So my tattoo artist actually, I don't even want to say it. I won't say it because it's not politically correct anymore. But it was a highly offensive name, and ultimately we just went by Ah. And I won't say it. we kind of played underground, and I think it was like our management was like, okay, by this date, we are going to have you signed to, I think it was like June 18th or something like that. I don't know why June 18th sticks in my head, but we're going to have you signed to one of these 3 labels. And I think it just put a lot of pressure on all of us. And we were like, holy shit, this is going to happen. I stopped showering for like 2 weeks. Like, you know how people have superstitions? I like wore the same t-shirt to every show and never washed it for like a month.
Wow.
It smelled really bad. Really bad. And that at the time I had a beard and I had really long hair. I wish I could show you a picture because I kind of looked maybe a little like Jesus, or what Jesus might look like, I guess. And our singer came to our band meeting one day. He goes, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to scream for a living. And he broke up the band. And we went back to the studio, just the 4 of us, and tried to do it without him, and it just felt uncomfortable. We're like, okay, we're done. And we all kind of went in separate directions. I ended up, it was odd though, because our singer came back. We were still friends, obviously, even to this day, but shortly after he left the band, I think it was like 6 months later, he goes, I joined another band. I'm singing for this group. And I'm like, it sounds just like the shit we were doing. Why the fuck did you leave us? And I kind of got pissed. But I ended up going into a band with the drummer from Ozzy Osbourne, this guy named Randy Castillo, who ultimately passed away. Randy was Ozzy's drummer for years. And then the guitar player was this kid named John Lowry. And I knew him because his girlfriend worked with my girlfriend at the time. And John was probably one of the most amazing guitar players I've ever played with. He ultimately kind of became a dick because I met him years later, and I, hey, how you been? And he's like, who are you? And I'm like, oh, we played in a band together. Like, he goes, what band was that? And I told him the name. He goes, oh, that was a long time ago. Oh, good to see you. Have a good day. And I left. And a buddy of mine actually asked me, he goes, what happened? I go, yeah, he's kind of a dick. He like played off like he didn't even know me. But it was John ultimately changed his name to John Five, and he was
The
Marilyn
guitarist
Manson's
from
guitar
yeah.
player, and now
Wow.
Rob Zombie. Yeah,
No shit. Okay. Wow.
but I will tell you that John likes to recycle music
Yeah.
because I found a song that Marilyn Manson recorded that sounded very similar to a song that I actually recorded with John. So yeah,
Hmm.
little recycling, just
Uh,
a change of the intonation a little bit.
just yeah. I mean, yeah. Back to cigars. Do you
Yeah,
remember the cigar that really first triggered your love for the leaf?
yeah. I mean, the first cigar that I ever was like, okay, that's the one I'm going to buy a box of, was made by Davidoff, and it was actually made in the Davidoff factory way back when, obviously in the early '90s. And it was called Private Stock Number 11. And I don't know if they still make Private Stock, but Private Stock eventually became a brand where they built it specifically. They just started rolling it. But when they originally made them, they were actually Davidoff seconds. They were legitimately Davidoff seconds that didn't make the color grade or they didn't look as pretty, and they would put them to the side and put them in this box that only had the bottom and it had no lid and it had a piece of paper on the top and then cellophane around the box to so you could actually see the cigars in the box, but it wasn't as fancy, right?
Yeah.
But it was truly a Davidoff second. And everybody I smoked it around was like, that smells really good. And I was like, well, it tastes really good. So that's the one I went out and bought a full box of. The cigar that really kind of nailed me though was Henry Clay,
Really?
because Henry Clay, I was looking for something a little bit, richer, a little bit fuller, and I saw this really ugly cigar in the box, all crinkled and kind of like out of shape. They weren't round. They're actually. I'll give you a great example of what Henry Clay used to look like. Have you seen the Jason Newman cigar that's called Yawa? Yagua or Ya? I think that's how they
Yes.
pronounce it.
I
Yawa.
think so.
It's kind of like shaped like a hexagon. It's got like weird curve, weird edges. Henry Clay looked like that because the cigars went into the bundles very wet, and they kind
Oh.
of smushed together and got weird edges. So not one cigar looked like another cigar in the box. It was that and a brand called Flamenco, which was the same cigar that Altadas made, or back then it was Consolidated. They made that cigar but discontinued Flamenco, and I actually bought one of the last boxes in the country of Flamenco. I still have some cigars from it back in the early '90s. Those cigars to me they were fun. You could chew on them, you could drop it on the ground, pick it back up, and it didn't break. Um, yeah, it was just something odd and special, and I thought the beauty was in its imperfections, and I loved it. And that's kind of like the one cigar that I really kind of turned everybody onto. Like anybody who came into Gus's smoke shop, which was my first job, they're like, what can you recommend? I'm like, you got to try this. They're like, it's $1 or $1.15. I go, just you have to try it. And people would
Yeah.
try it, and I still have friends that are still smoking them to this day, just because they need to have like some around because it's nostalgic for them. I love it.
Let's talk about the Monster series real quick, or as you call it, your
Sure.
nightmare. Can you tell our listeners about the series? Will the Monsters be a regular annual release, or I mean, I noticed that every year you're coming out with the skinnies and you come out with a different one, but the Monsters seem to be an annual thing so far.
Yeah, the monsters were always an annual thing since 2008, starting with the Frank, and eventually we went through all the monsters that I wanted to do, and then I did an interim monster, which was Karloff, and then the whole goal was to start back to one again. So every year we're just going to come back out with the same portfolio, just as a redux.
Yeah.
So we did Frank Redux, we did Drac Redux, This year will be the Face Redux.
Cool.
We still the monster blends that we do in the Skinny Monsters and the Cazadori collection, the Lancero collection. Those are kind of a every year production, so people can try those blends in those smaller ring gauges. They're an every year production, but they're also very limited, and we make them usually like once a year, like 500 boxes of the samplers. The Skinny Monsters in the those nice little colorful jar type of boxes. Those we make. Actually, we were looking at inventory today. We make about 400 boxes of each size a year. So, not a lot. That's 10,000 cigars.
Yeah,
it's not a lot of cigars.
It's pretty limited. Yeah.
So we try to keep it that way because we want to make sure that the people that really want them always have them. But I think it's a good number, and it keeps it available, but not too available, I guess, for lack of better words. Controlled distribution.
Will there be any new monsters introduced to the series, or is your lineup pretty set?
I did a creature in the Bellonc or the Britannica size. I don't know if I'll come out with a full-size creature yet. I don't think I'm going to introduce too many extra monsters. Yeah, I think we're good with. I mean, it's 13 monsters. That was the whole original plan. 13 monsters.
Yep.
And 13 monsters. By the time we get back to redoing it again, it will be 13 years for someone to get a Frank again. I think that's a good wait.
It's pretty cool.
I think by that time it will be in demand again.
Did you have any issues with any other companies or industries when you released the monsters? Using the monsters' names or even using the word monster.
No. Well, okay. So using the monster's name, I've never actually used the name, the full name. It's always been the Drac, the Frank, the Face, the Mummy. Well, the Mummy is public domain pretty much. But I've always been very careful to make sure that I don't overstep any boundaries.
Yeah.
The only time I ever really had a problem was with Monster Energy because they like to pick on anybody that uses the word monster, but I own the trademark in the cigar industry, so they ultimately couldn't do anything, and all they could do is try to mess with me and hurt my bank account, because all they're doing is making me pay legal bills.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to stick to your guns and just say, go away. It's like it's a bully. That's what essentially they are. They're a big bully that likes to hurt small businesses. And I know for a fact that multiple judges have thrown cases that they've brought up out of court because they were just frivolous. And the greatest thing about having the trademark is they knew they couldn't do anything with the name.
Yeah.
So they tried to come after me for colors. Like, they told me they didn't like me using vibrant green. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It was more of a pain in the ass than anything.
Putting it in music terms, correlating cigar and album releases, and using Metallica as an example. What cigar release of yours would be considered your Black Album, and what cigar release of yours would be considered your Load Album?
Wow. That's a tough one. I mean, I think the Black Album's got to be probably the original Brown Label.
Yeah.
And the other album, I'm sorry, was which album? The shitty one?
Yeah. The one that they had to do twice. The one they had to reload.
I would never compare anything to that album because
good answer.
If I don't like something, we just don't make it.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
I mean, there's not always a cigar that everybody loves,
right.
um, but there are people that do enjoy it, and they get disappointed when we tell them we're discontinuing them. So if you had to look at it that way of okay, people, not everybody enjoyed it. That's the best way to put it. If someone, not everybody enjoyed it, I would say maybe the original Triumphador, which was not the brown label one, but the original red label one.
Okay.
Not everybody enjoyed it because they thought it was too light. They thought it was too easy. Um, it didn't have enough punch, and they didn't think that. I always love this. They're like, it's not a Tatuaje. I'm like, it's not supposed to be a Tatuaje. Not every cigar is supposed to be a Tatuaje. Tatuaje is its own thing, and Triumphador is its own thing, and
Yep.
Cabaiguan is its own thing, and Larry is its own thing. So I would say that
I
was
think I think that
probably
described the Load
one of the
album,
bigger
right? Was
disappointments.
the Load album was too light, didn't have enough punch. People didn't like. I mean, I think that's a perfect comparison. Can you tell everybody about the Saints and Sinners Club? What is it? How did it start? And what is your vision for that club?
Well, we'll start off. It's definitely not a cult, so we'll start there. We'll go back to that again.
I said club, but
No, I know you did. I'm just going back in time a little bit. Saints and Sinners started as a community, and it was like really a social club. It was supposed to be a social club for cigar smokers, and it was never supposed to be about only Tatuaje. It's a social club for people who enjoy cigars. It's supposed to be. We never censored the forums. It was, you could talk about whatever you wanted to talk about. Just be nice to each other. That's the whole
yep,
key. Is like we end up ultimately we had a lot of trolls on our forum, and the trolls would beat people up like constantly. And our biggest rule was like, we're not going to censor anything, but be kind to your neighbor. And if someone smokes a cigar you don't like, who gives a shit, right?
right.
But it was never supposed to be a Tatuaje fan club. Someone said, "Oh, it's kind of like the Kiss Army." I go, well, "Kinda," but the Kiss Army was really directive about only listening to Kiss. This is a club and a forum for people that enjoy cigars, and the fact that you took a chance on us, we welcome you. And it's supposed to be a community and a family, and ultimately it turned into a charitable organization where it's not registered as a charitable organization, but we do donate a lot of the proceeds every year to two different causes that we believe in, whether it be to dog rescues or to a cancer foundation.
Yeah.
We used to donate to one of Casper's groups that he used to be a tour manager for. Andrew from Jack's Mannequin
Oh,
had some type of cancer. I forgot what it was. So we'd always donate to his big golf tournament every year that he was doing, or his big charity that he did. And then over the last multiple years, we actually cut a check to the CRA for $30,000 every year from the club, just to protect all of our rights to smoke cigars. So that was really the one that became more important for us when the FDA came involved, and the CRA was scrambling to raise money from the industry to help fight our battles. I told Casper and our other business partner in there, because Casper is actually one of my business partners in Saints and Sinners, and our buddy Ali. Um, I told him, I said, listen, it's important for me that the CRA gets our members involved. I mean, that the Saints and Sinners gets our members involved by making them pitch in also. So what happens is we ask the club members to contribute, well, not contribute, but to pay a little bit more for the club kit every year. In turn, we give them back two special cigars that are only made for the Saints and Sinners members, labeled with CRA bands. This is not something the CRA pays for. We do it all on our end,
Wow.
but we give them back the product for what they paid for, and then we donate X amount of dollars per member, and usually it's around $30,000. I think there was a couple years we did a little bit more, but then on top of it, I pitch in another 40 plus to the CRA every year because I believe in the cause and I believe in protecting our freedoms when it comes to what we make and what we produce and what everybody gets to enjoy to smoke. Because if you go back to the CRA and the FDA beginnings, the FDA was trying to convince everybody that a $10 cigar should be the minimum price point. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. Like, a $2 cigar for a guy who drives a tractor every day, that's his super premium.
Yeah.
How do you tell him that he's not worthy to buy something that he enjoys? That's his premium. Because he'll walk into a store and look at the $10 cigar and say, I don't need that shit. I love my $2 cigar. And now the FDA is going to tell you that it has to be $10? No fucking way. So, yeah, it's something I'm angry about. Like,
No,
kind
rightfully
of
so.
overly talkative about sometimes. And I'm glad that the CRA was able to win a few battles for the industry.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it was really the work from the CRA and a few companies that contributed a lot of money and a lot of time to the organization that helped all of us, all the brand owners, every brand owner that's in this industry, every retailer and every consumer not have to pay exorbitant prices to enjoy a handmade product,
Yeah,
an
absolutely.
unaltered handmade product.
And I can speak for all of us when I say thank you for those efforts. Out of your line, what is your
Yeah.
personal go-to favorite child and why?
I always have to say the Havana Cazadori and the original brown label. The name, okay, so the size means something to me because the Romeo Cazadori was actually one of my favorite cigars when I was younger. 6 3/8 by 43. Every time I would buy a box of Romeo Cazadoris, I would peel open the foil paper and stick my nose in the foil paper, and it's like a chocolate factory baking inside the foil. So when I started the line, the first thing I did is I'm going to mimic that style. I want to open up my box, my foil, stick my nose in it, and smell that chocolate factory. And the name means Havana's hunter. So Havana Cazadori. So Havana hunt. It's so. I had two dogs at the time, Havana and Cuba. I'm sorry, Havana and Hunter. And Hunter had passed away before I started the brand. That was really kind of where the Hunter series comes from. So I kind of filled in the gap with the Havana Cazadori to call it, to put both names on there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the one. That's the Desert Island cigar for me. That's the one I'm going to take with me every time. Because I know I can get every bit of flavor that I need out of that cigar. And to me, it still tastes the same.
And your wife being a cigar smoker, does she have a favorite smoke from Tatuaje?
Yeah, she was a La Riqueza fan.
Okay.
That's ultimately that's why I made the La Dueña line, because she would smoke here and there, and she would be on the road smoking La Riquezas at events with a lot of the events that we were at together. And I was like, I'm going to make her a cigar. And it became one of these things where I was going to the factory for about a year, making samples of basically the same blend every time, because I was really testing to make sure, because I used a lot of thinner ring gauges, and I wanted to make sure that the rollers were rolling them properly, because the blend is kind of complex and it has a lot of broadleaf in it. So what I was worried about, is that because of the thickness of the leaves that they were using, whether or not they would have issues drawing. So for about a year, I was going down there, and I walked into my brother-in-law's office, and he goes, "What are those cigars right there?" And I go, "They're La Dueña samples." And he goes, "Nah, no more samples. You need to make the line and order the sizes for the show." I said, "It's not my line. It's your it's your line. So you got to make your own order." And it became her thing, because Pepin had a line, Jaime had a line, but Yanni was the one on the road all the time. So I said, "You should have your own thing.
Yeah.
That way, when people talk to you, you're talking about your product and not just your family's product."
Yep.
And it became like a kind of a small you know following to it. It's not crazy big sales, but they continue to make it because it's part of the family. And I think if they looked at the true numbers of that line based on their scale of company, they'd probably get rid of it, because it's it's not a big seller. But at the same time, there are a core group of people that really enjoy it.
And if you're not smoking your own line, is there anything made by somebody else that you grab out of your humidor, and why is that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I always used to say, like, I do like some other brands outside of the factory, but over the years, like, people ask me all the time, like, "Have you smoked anything new?" I'm like, "I've smoked a bunch of like custom Cubans, but I'm always smoking Cuban cigars because I just want to see how they're progressing, and if they're truly catching up to everybody else, because I
Yeah.
think they're behind everybody." There was a time where Cuba, when it came to quality and consistency and flavor, they were way ahead of everybody, in my opinion. But there was a time where it crossed, and they went backwards even further. So there was a brief time where, like, years ago, like, I would pick up maybe an Illusione that Dion was making, or maybe an Opus X or a Padron or something like that. But the last multiple years, it's been hard for me to smoke anything but our product, because we're constantly working on new projects, and I want to be on top of the flavor profiles constantly to make sure that the cigars are good. So I not only do I smoke a lot of our stuff, but I smoke a lot of the Garcia's product, because I just want to be a voice of reason if I find something wrong with one of their cigars. And it could be a blend that's one of their most historic blends that maybe just had a bad batch. So I'm always chiming in, just to make sure that they don't get caught um, with you know people saying, "Oh man, the cigars are bad, or they're changed." I want to make sure that the family is strong together. And so I always say, like, "Hey, what do you smoke outside of your brand?" I smoke Pepin, I smoke Jaime, I smoke Flor de las Antillas a lot. Maybe I'll smoke a Las Calaveras. Maybe I'll smoke a La Roma Mi Amor. So it's always things within the factory.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any recent or current releases that the folks out there should know about and should go out and find right now?
Current releases right now, um, we are shipping. Actually, I think they're all shipped. The retailers should have them. The PCA 2022 and the TAA 2022, which we delayed, not because the cigars weren't ready. We delayed because we weren't ready. We had so much going on in 2022 that I we just talked within the group, and we said, let's just push them to next year. It made more sense not to rush them. The cigars got an extra few months of age. Um, for us, I think it made the guy our main guy in the office, Andy, I think it made him happy that he wouldn't have to stress during the end of the year to try to get all these boxes out. So we just said, screw it. We can wait until January. And shit, it worked out great because all the cigars are out the door. Every
Yeah.
retailer should have them by now. And yeah, we're happy that that they're out on the streets, but because they're good. I got a nice text message from a dear friend in the industry that I've known for probably 20 plus years, actually longer, uh, saying you did it again. It was a picture of the TA cigar. No, sorry, the PCA cigar.
Just lit up the Fausto. Complete opposite of
Oh,
what we just had. But may I say?
Which
Yeah.
Is that the 140 or?
Yes, I believe so.
It's either the 140 or the 150. No, it's the 140. Maybe the
Yeah.
127.
Still great, but complete
Yeah,
opposite.
big,
Much
bold,
more bold, peppery
big,
flavors
bold.
coming.
Yeah, a little bit
Uh,
over the top. I mean,
yeah.
that's all high priming tobacco. That's
This
high
is a
visos and ligeros, so you're gonna get a big punch.
yeah. This is definitely the whiskey.
That's a whiskey cigar.
Our mutual friend Beans mentioned to me that there's an event in Chicago coming up in February. Can you tell us about that event?
What was that?
Beans mentioned that there is an event.
I missed what it was.
The event in Chicago that's coming up in February.
Mardi Gras. Yeah, the Mardi Gras. That's Uptown Tobacco or Uptown Cigar or Uptown Tobacco on Wells Street in Chicago. We've been doing this Mardi Gras thing for years. Obviously, the pandemic killed it for a few years. But yeah, shit. I think we, since Casey and Dan started doing it, it might be close to. We started maybe 8 years ago, maybe, I can't remember, but it was Diana. The first one I attended, Diana was still around. Diana was still alive, so shit, it might be even longer. I would love to find out actually, because I think it might be longer. It might be 10 years. But it's a fun event. The guys at Uptown support the brand heavily. It's all based around Fat Tuesday. It's on Tuesday, actually. It's on Fat Tuesday. I'm literally flying in for the event and flying out the next morning.
Okay.
So maybe part of the plane.
So I understand in 2012, you started working with a winery. At that time, you mentioned that maybe in 10 years, you might see a debut of a Tatuaje wine. Here we are 10 years later. Can you talk about that wine project, where it is now and where it's currently going?
Yeah, I did 5 vintages. So my first vintage actually was 2010. I made it in Bordeaux, France. All the grapes came from Saint-Emilion, which is the right bank. At one time, I actually had a Saint-Emilion designation, so an AOC Saint-Emilion, because everything was done. All the grapes were from Saint-Emilion, and all the processing and bottling was done in Saint-Emilion. Unfortunately, for my AOC designation, once they started taking all the juice and bringing it across the river to the left bank, my designation became just AOC Bordeaux, because you can't move the juice around and call it one region if it's not 100% from that region.
Yeah.
A very strict labeling laws with wine. Like, I have a saying on my arm, tattooed on my arm, and it says "Buvez du vin, vivez joyeux," which means drink wine and enjoy life, or live life joyously. And they came back to me and says, we can't put the part about drink wine on the bottle. I go, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, that's what you're doing with the bottle. You're drinking the wine. They're like, no, you can't you can't actually promote the drinking of wine. So if you look at all the corks, it's my label, my logo, and it just says "Vive Joyeux," live life joyously.
Okay.
Um,
The name of the company. Like,
and honestly,
if I were to look for the wine, what's the name of the wine? Is it Tatuaje wine, or what's the name of the company?
no, it's called Tatuaje, but I only did
Okay.
5 vintages, so 2010 to 2014. I did 5 vintages, and I decided that that was enough. Like I stopped going to Bordeaux, and I stopped making more wine. It it became it was a it was a basically a giant vanity project, and it was a way for me to test my skills blending stuff in a different realm, and I always wanted to do it. So we talked about the journey earlier on of how, like, hey, shit, I'll carry bags. I'll teach me how
Yeah.
to set up mic stands on a stage. I mean, obviously I know how to do that, but like, I'll do whatever you want on this tour with the Jonas Brothers. But the wine, like, that was a big part of my journey, like just testing myself, really proving to myself that I could do something different.
Yeah.
um, so everything that I've done over the years of having the luxury to be able to do those things from the cigar industry has really been a test, just to see if I can do things, and again, to make myself feel good, because that's essentially what that shit is. It's a vanity project. You feel great about it. You feel good about yourself when you do it. Um, but I think I made a pretty good wine, and I didn't do all the work. I made the wine very similar to the way I do cigars. Like, I go into a room and I play mad scientist, and then I let the people that actually know what the fuck they're doing do the work.
Yeah. Have you
Because I
experimented
I
with?
mean I live. Go
I was
ahead.
going to ask,
Sorry.
have you experimented with aging tobacco in those wine barrels?
Not in wine barrels, but in bourbon barrels.
Okay.
So years and years ago, I think this goes back to 2017, maybe. Someone's going to correct me, but we did a barrel of Willet.
Oh, cool.
Willet whiskey.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
did a
I've
barrel
been to
with
that
Willet.
distillery.
We went on a tour with Drew Coltsveen, the son and master distiller of the family. We went on
Hmm.
a tour with him, and he took us around, and we tapped a bunch of barrels, and we found a particular barrel that we fell in love with. And once the barrel is emptied out, he kind of gives the end person the barrel. And I
Yeah.
asked him, I said, can I get 3 more barrels, because I want to play around with some things. But ultimately, I only use one barrel to test aging tobacco in barrels, and you get a really unique character to it. Um, the FDA kind of scared me away from really doing it, so we never really went full board with it. But I did a couple releases where the tobacco, the filler tobacco, was aged in the barrel, and I kept
Cool.
the binders and the wrapper neutral,
Yeah.
just because I didn't want it to be overpowered by the flavor. But it does add like a unique, almost like a banana note to things. It's weird.
Hmm.
But I remember popping the barrel open the first time, because it's fairly easy to open up a barrel. You got to take the rings off and then peel the staves,
Yeah.
and then pop out the top, and then you put the staves back together, and then put the rings back on, right? And then the top becomes just a lid you set on top. And we put a handle on it, and we actually put like something underneath to lock in
Just to
the,
seal it.
kind of like make a vapor seal to it. But
Hmm.
as soon as we open it up, I stuck my head in the barrel and I almost passed out. It's like super strong, and you got to be careful. And it actually all started because the guys from Uptown, we go back to Uptown, the Mardi Gras event, they weren't buying, they were getting barrels from Goose Island.
Yeah.
and they were taking some of our cigars and aging them in barrels that were amazing. So I started sending them cigars and say, hey, do me a favor, put these in the barrels for a while. I want to taste them. And that's really
Cool.
where the experimental part came. But we tried it on a couple projects, and then ultimately we never did anything with it. It's fun, but if this industry is kind of you know the land of romance bullshit, right? There's a lot of shit in our industry where people make up great stories about things, but when you see barrels in factories that have been aging tobacco in these barrels, a lot of times those barrels are completely spent. There's no aroma, no anything left to them. It's good marketing.
Yeah.
In the sense of what we were doing, there was these barrels were still very alive. They still had a lot of strength to them. When you repurpose a barrel over and over and over again after it's been opened, it's going to eventually bleed out completely, and it's not going to accent much of anything. It's really more of a marketing tool.
Yeah.
We never got to the whole point where it was like the barrels were spent. We used it for a couple times, had fun with it, and then we finished the vanity project.
One last question. I understand Tatuaje is actually
Yeah.
turning 20 years old this year. Um, did you imagine the opportunities
Yep.
and success that that you now have, and when you started, and where would you like to see Tatuaje in the next 10 years? So when you guys turn 30.
Uh, I mean, I'll say that I'm happy that we got to 20. We never went into it thinking we were gonna let's get to 20 years.
Yeah.
When we got to 10, that was a big deal. That was super exciting. We celebrated. We had a nice party. I started doing these vanity projects, like the wine, and then also going on tour with the Jonas Brothers. Um, I started doing things for myself a little bit more because I really the first 10 years I busted my ass traveling constantly. I started slowing down a little bit on travel in the last 10 years, but I was still out there so much that the airlines like me. Um, I would say I hope to get to 30, and I hope I don't disappoint people.
Yeah.
Um, to me, it really means a lot when people enjoy the product, but it hurts the most when they don't enjoy it. So I'm hoping I don't disappoint anybody, and I'm hoping that we make it to 30 without too many hiccups. And I think we're on a good pace to make it to 30 without too many problems because the Garcias have a giant stockpile of tobacco. They have a great infrastructure. We have access to all of that um, because of the relationship. And again, I just want to make good shit and uh,
Well, yeah.
and not disappoint people's palates. And
I
when
would
I
say
do
I would
that,
say from
then I'll
my
be
my
disappointed.
perspective, I would say from my perspective, from the window I look out of, if you keep doing what you're doing and the relationship that and the pepines and the Garcia, like that is a formula for success. And I feel like I don't think I see any type of disappointment coming from you and your team.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't plan on it. Like,
You know,
my plan is to not suck. You
yeah,
know.
and not make a load album. Uh,
On that note, I love it. Yeah.
well, it looks like our time is running out. I could sit here and just burn cigars all night with you, but this episode seems like it's coming down to a nub. Pete, thanks again for joining.
And I
I can't,
lost you.
yeah, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Um, this was educational, and I appreciate it. Folks, don't forget to like,
No,
share, subscribe, all that stuff. I'm not big into social media, but whatever bells and whistles and thumbs that you need to press, please do all of that. Uh, Pete, thanks. This was huge. everyone, don't forget to stay safe, stay smoky.
Matt, I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I'm going to try to get out to Uptown and meet you in person. If not, I'm sure it'll happen sometime soon. But yeah, thanks again.
Very cool.
Folks, see you next time here at the Cigar Social Podcast.